Neil, can I welcome you to the PH office? I know it was, we had a conversation about COVID and the challenges right at the beginning of the pandemic and sort of planning some of the concerns there. So I want to have the opportunity to revisit some of those and thinking also about the next 3 to 6 months and where we're at with that as we enter the autumn and winter period. But just before we do that, Neil, can you just introduce yourself, what your role is in pulmonary hypertension and with the PHA?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So my name's Neil Hamilton. I'm the consultant pharmacist in pulmonary hypertension at the Royal Hampshire in Sheffield. I've had the pleasure of doing a lot of work in the past with the PHA, both in terms of medication advice and writing regular contributions for the Emphasis magazine. And of course, the last time that I was asked to speak on medication and the coronavirus, things were very, very different, and I did the recording at home, so it's really nice today now that the office is back open and we can, albeit at a distance, meet up face to face and discuss these really important issues.
So when we talked, I think it was probably March, April time. Okay, we were sort of trying to alert people, not to frighten, but to alert people to some of the challenges that we felt that we might have during a pandemic about drug supply. How have those, because there was concern, we're talking specifically about the pH therapies, not exclusive, but about pH therapies. And much of that, I think, is it well over 95% is delivered by home care delivery services. How's that actually eked out? Was it, you were quite concerned?
Yeah.
Was it I think things have happened.
Yeah, so obviously at the outset, we didn't know how this was going to play out. We didn't know how many people would be off work at any time and what services would be affected in terms of delivering medication, prescribing medication, for the home care delivery companies to be able to source from their wholesalers and their suppliers everything that the PH patients needed, PH medication, the blood test kits, all the lines, cleaning equipment for patients on intravenous therapy. So the whole thing was new ground, and what we had to do was plan for the worst, and make sure that everybody was teed up, was doing more advanced planning than there had been before to make sure that they didn't run out, really communicate well with their home care delivery company to make sure that they were accessible and vice versa for delivery slots. And we continue to do a lot of work nationally to make sure that medication supplies are not running low, particularly around what we call the generic tablets such as sildenafil and bosentan that we were concerned might run short from time to time. So fortunately, and it has been good news up to now, that those fears around shortages were unfounded, and I've been delighted to say that the home care delivery companies have largely been able to keep up to speed with the demand. We know that they've changed some of the way they work, and a lot of the calls happen from working from home rather than all their operatives being in the head office as they used to be. So they've really had to change very much the way that they're set up. But my understanding is that the deliveries have gone ahead pretty much as planned, and the figures that I get would back that up.
So I think it's by good planning by people like yourselves and your colleagues, pharmacists and things like that really just sort of maintain this. And one of the interesting things, as you're probably aware of, we when we're just writing this data up, we did have done an impact study on people with pulmonary hypertension in the UK, and we've had well over 800, so it's taken a lot longer to analyse the data. But one of the areas we did look at was looking at the support that people felt that they got from their home care delivery services, and it was well over 80%, and I think that's a really good news story in the middle of a pandemic. Of in a rare disease. I think there's credit to all the home care delivery people, and also I think to your colleagues, particularly the pharmacy departments, pharmacists and pharmacy technicians, in that communication that they've had to maintain during the last 6 months, and probably need to again for the next 6 months to maintain this safety. So that's a really good news story, and that's about planning and thinking beforehand, and not taking the eye off the ball. We're not there at the moment, but we've got so much more experience, so we can be far more confident. And I think the other thing as well, Neil, giving credit to people, is that the individuals themselves, so patients with pulmonary hypertension, planning ahead, making sure that they're well in advance, that don't run out in 2 days' time of any medication. At least give it 7 to 10 days notice. Know that you've got enough drug, particularly the very rare drugs that we use in pulmonary hypertension.
So standardly, we advise everyone to make sure they've got 7 to 14 days, what we would call a buffer stock, so that's sort of comfort stock, and then if there is a problem with the delivery, you're not running out of your last day or two of medicines. So that's absolutely standard, and we've really reinforced that must be the case at this time when there's more uncertainty around the services and deliveries. I mean, fortunately, as we've both seen, both from your data and the survey and what I'm receiving in the hospital, that deliveries have been fine up to now. But really, it's to hammer home the importance of that planning and that organisation. And so it is around pH medication. Make sure you've got at least 7 days, ideally 14, at the point that the delivery is next to you. But it's also around accessing repeat prescriptions from GP. So when if you've got to order your repeat medicines, don't leave it till the last minute, because there may be less people at the surgery at any one time, so they may be turning over the repeats a bit more slowly. There may also be less people in the local pharmacy there to dispense or deliver it to you if that's what normally happens. So don't leave things till the last minute. Just be a bit more organised in terms of ordering, making sure you've got stock in. And if you've any concerns, then do call. So contact the surgery or contact the local pharmacy if you've concerns about medicines you get that way. And contact us at the centres if you've concerns about your pH medication, if you can't get through for any reason to the home care medicines people. So the first port of call is to call any of the providers that look after you for your pH meds. If they haven't called you when you think they should have done and you're worried about your delivery slot, make sure you call. Don't just sit and wait and expect it to happen automatically. It's absolutely natural to be anxious, and you want to make sure that your delivery is going to happen. So call up the delivery company, make sure it's in place. And if you can't get through for any reason, then ring us at the centre. We'd much rather deal with those sorts of queries when you've got a week, 10 days, 2 weeks left, rather than phoning us up when you're down to 1 or 2 days remaining, and then it becomes much more of a challenge to get drug out to you without you missing any doses.
Because that's really important, isn't it? There's this saying, isn't it? A stitch in time saves... A stitch in... What is it?
Stitch in time saves 9. That's Boris's new phrase.
Yes,
his favourite phrase this week.
Yeah, but it is relative. It's about being planned, isn't it? It's about thinking, do what you can.
It is.
And it's a particularly good thing at the moment.
Yeah, because everything's so much easier to solve or resolve problems with plenty of notice. Yeah. Rather than at the very last minute, and then it puts demands all along the chain in terms of making sure that you're not running out.
One of the things that we talked about, Neil, early this year, when we entered COVID and the lockdowns and the restrictions, was the place of in pulmonary hypertension regular blood monitoring for people on certain medicines and things like that. Do you want to talk to that, what you said at the beginning, and this so when we say you, I know you were working with your colleagues in all the specialist centres and things like that, so what's the situation, what was it then and what is it now?
I mean, just in terms of the working with other centres, I mean, that's been for me a real success story in that on a fortnight, it's now fortnightly, it was weekly, but there is regular contact between all the different centres in the UK. Myself as a pharmacist, and I know you're representing the patients on those calls and those interactions, that there is a real good thread of communication to understand who's doing what, and making sure that patients are getting the benefit of good practice and all good ideas, whichever centre they visit. So that's been a real positive. And one of the things that we were able to agree in that collaboration between all the centres is that we couldn't get access to blood tests, routine blood tests through GP surgeries during the lockdown. Patients prescribed bosentan, macitentan and ambrisentan are required in the normal course of events to have blood tests, and that's for their safety, to make sure that those medicines aren't causing any problems with their liver enzymes. So the rising in a liver enzyme might be a signal that there could be problems with the liver down the line. So it's not an immediate alarm, but it triggers us to have to do something about it. So those are important safety tests for people's well-being. And during lockdown, we couldn't do the blood test. People couldn't get access to those, to the surgeries. So what we had to say is, don't go for those bloods. If patients were getting bloods for something different, something more urgent, for example, they were on warfarin or other blood thinners and needed an INR check, it might have been possible to get some liver function done at that time. If people were having monitoring for other conditions, it might have been possible to get liver function at that time. But it wasn't our place, as we saw it, to recommend people who were recommended to shield to go and get what amounted to a routine blood test. As things have evolved,
but an important blood test in the long term.
It's an important blood test in the long term, and that's why as soon as the shielding came to an end, then we communicated out to all of our patients, right, it's now been probably 5 or 6 months since a blood test. It's really important to know that there isn't any problems with anybody's liver, or so it is important to know that. Please go out and start getting back in the swing of blood tests. But what those communications again with the other centres showed us was that different centres had different frequencies, and we wanted to bring it all into line so that again that was something that could all be similar. And Sheffield was actually running blood tests for patients on macitentan and ambrisentan more frequently than some of the other centres recommended. So we went back to the guidance. We saw that actually it would be possible to do those blood tests quite safely but less frequently. So that's what we're moving to now, which means that patients on bosentan, wherever you're seen, would be doing monthly blood tests because that's what's required. And patients on macitentan or ambrisentan now only go every 3 months. But if you haven't had communication already from your centre to go out and get a blood test done, and it might be February or March since you did so, then please go and arrange a blood test with the surgery, with the local phlebotomy clinic where you ever used to go, and get those results in, just so that we can have that reassurance that there isn't any problems.
As you said, Neil, I was going to say, sorry for interrupting, though, it's for the individual safety, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's absolutely, yeah.
You actually touched upon, I wanted to sort of, the final bit of this podcast, just to look at engaging with healthcare per se, and this is a good segue into that, with the bloods and etc. that, you know, at the moment we're recording this towards the end of September, we've got this increasing infection rate, and it's concerned nothing like it was, you know, before, but that's not playing it down and things like that, and obviously some greater restrictions geographically, etc. How important do you think, as a pharmacist and a highly regarded expert in pulmonary hypertension, to people continue to engage successfully in healthcare rather than sort of locking themselves away and waiting, you know, till things get bad?
Yeah, so I think it's really important in all the centres and probably all the local hospitals. The environment, the way the staff work, the whole setup will be totally different to how it used to run and how people are used to seeing it, for better or worse. But we all need to be responsible. The environment is extremely controlled in order to keep patients safe. That's what the whole aim of it is. So the amount of people coming through at any one time is much reduced. There are systems of one way, there are extra hand hygiene, staff wear masks to protect those patients and each other from the risk of contracting the coronavirus. So I would really encourage people, don't stay at home and be worried and at the risk of getting worse from pulmonary hypertension or any other chronic condition. if you're called to an appointment and the service says it needs to see you, be that routine or for an investigation, you need to come, and you need to be reassured and have confidence that everything there is set up with your safety and the safety of the staff around in mind. So that's it's a really important thing. And whilst we can do a lot, and everybody is doing a lot more with telephones, maybe video conferencing, there will still be a need for face-to-face interactions, and to make a diagnosis of pulmonary hypertension will require a face-to-face interaction. Yeah. And it's really important, because we know that the earlier that we start any treatment, make a diagnosis, start treatment, it generates a better outcome. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really important for people to have confidence and not be too anxious that they don't want to come or cancel appointments, and then they need to come, and that the service will look after them and keep the staff safe at the same time, and then we can do best for everybody.
Good. That's really helpful, Neil. Now, this final question, and I'm not going to spring this, well, I am going to spring it on you a little bit, because it's something that came to mind as you're talking, but I know your experience and expertise in development of drugs, etc. You've been involved in lots of drug trials in many years with pulmonary hypertension, and you just sort of brought to mind about vaccines and things like that. And I know one of the questions, again, through PHA, through Facebook, and just in the general public, why is it not just, and this is a broad question, Neil, okay. So I know, for example, there's about 180 vaccine studies going on for COVID at the moment in the world. Yeah. Why does it take so long? Why not just, is it not possible to develop something very quickly and get it into the population? What happens in a study? I know this is a vaccine study, but clinical trials, what is the process that goes through, and why do they take longer than we would really want, particularly at this time?
Yeah, so I suppose in terms of, well, any medication delivery, then there are a number of stages. Firstly, there's obviously chemical compounds that are developed in a laboratory. They may undergo some animal testing or some preliminary work to see if the compound is likely to be toxic or harmful. Mm-hmm. And then if it looks promising from work, what we call in vitro or in the laboratory, then the next step is to go to do some early studies into humans, and then if that obviously takes the time to see whether it's safe and effective, and then it goes on to the next stage of the development, which would be a wider study. And for a vaccine, what you've also got to do is be able to prove that whatever medicine has been created has the capability to protect that individual from, in this case, the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. So that person, even if they're in a study, has got to be exposed sufficiently to other people with the coronavirus in order to be able to show that actually they received a level of protection. That sort of thing's really difficult, particularly in lockdown where there's distancing and everyone is trying to use other measures in addition to the vaccine to protect themselves. So there will be a lengthy process. There will obviously be a race in terms of companies trying to be the first to prove that they've got an effective vaccine. I think patients need to be reassured that in this country there is really rigorous, probably the most rigorous anywhere in the world, testing before any vaccine or drug can come to license and can be approved for use. So once our licensing bodies are satisfied that any one of these 180 odd, and they might all work in a different way to protect patients from the virus, interact with different parts of the virus itself. So there are a number of different pathways, a number of different mechanisms. Much like in PH, we deal with different drug mechanisms. So there are, but the crux of it is that our regulatory bodies will make sure that anything is absolutely thoroughly tested and will be safe for use, because there have obviously been problems in the past where a vaccine or a medication has been licensed and approved, and then far down the line, once it gets in wider use, we find that there might be complications, and that'll obviously be an anxiety that will be present. But current testing current regulatory requirements mean that people can have confidence, but it does that. All that takes a great amount of time.
Yeah. So it's firstly safety and then effectiveness, isn't it? That's where we're
I think it's safety and effectiveness hand in hand.
And again, in the world of medicine development and drugs, etc., I think one of the things, good news stories of COVID-19, and sometimes it's difficult to see those, is the collaborative work that globally has gone on for the development of 180 studies. The likelihood is we'll probably end up with, hopefully, more than one vaccine, or maybe several vaccines, and not be a single vaccine and things like that. But that collaborative work and where medical science has come together is I think a word of encouragement has been remarkable.
Yeah, but certainly the work done in Oxford and the other groups in the UK has been right at the forefront of that. Mm-hmm. So it's really positive for the UK as well. Good.
Well, many thanks again, Neil, for coming in.
Welcome.
We'll probably be dragging you in again, hopefully. Hopefully we can do it socially distanced. I quite like a bit of distance between myself and you, but it's really helpful. And can I just, from the PHA, give a real big thanks to you and your colleagues who are working in the specialist centres, particularly, and I think as we were talking, often you hear, not just in pulmonary hypertension, but big thanks to doctors and nurses, and I think there's a big, I get quite embarrassed by that sometimes, because I know that having worked for many a decade now in healthcare, that we're only successful because of the team that's there, and your colleagues, pharmacy technicians, clerical staff are just as crucial, but it's always big thanks to the doctors and nurses. So big thanks to you, Neil, as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.